Amen. On that, I feel the Spirit moving in me and you here tonight. We must not be discouraged because we are so few in number. You see, a couple of thousand years ago, it was a handful of peoples whose consciousness still moves in us today. These people didn't have the freedom of having a home group like we have, a sanctuary in a building. They were hidden in catacombs underground, in the mountains, in caves. They had to speak in hushes because of the danger of the persecution that was happening there from the Roman Empire. And yet that consciousness persisted. It is that awareness of this powerful presence of the Christ within each of us that was so secret. And here we are. We have been awakened. And we are here to increase our light and to pass it on. And so I say amen to that. Amen. Happy New Year and Happy New You. You know, there was this traveling salesman who was driving off the main road, and he got lost. And he happened to see an old farmer standing up against a fence post. He was sucking on a piece of wheat straw, had an old straw hat on his head. He was just passing time, him and his old dog. So this city slicker, you know, he's driving his new BMW. He pulls up, top down. He says, "Hey, old man." He says, I seem to be a little lost here. He says, "Can you tell me where I am?" The old farmer, he kind of leaned back a little bit. He spit a little of that tobacco on the side. He said, "Well, boy," he said, "look to me, you right here." He said, No. I mean, how did I get here?" Old farmer said, "Well, look like to me you come from down there, boy." He says, No, where am I going? Where does this road go?" Old farmer said, "Well, I expect it goes right down there." He says, "Oh man, listen, I'm lost. I'm trying to get back to the main highway. Can you tell me how to get back to the main highway?" Old farmer leaned back, spit again. He said, "No, boy, I don't expect you could get there from here." He said, "You stupid old man, you don't know much, do you?" Old farmer said, "No, boy, I expect I don't, but I ain't lost neither." We laugh, but sometimes, how often do we find ourselves asking the blind for directions, asking people who themselves are lost, right? Even in the media today, we've got on our political arena, we've got opposite parties pointing in the opposite directions, each of them saying, "This is the way to go. Go this way. Do this." It's like the blind leading the blind. So how do we get back to our light? How do we find our way in the darkness? Why is it that we got lost in the first place? You know, we were granted some powers when we came here on this plane. The powers of spiritual discernment and the power of judgment. Each one of those powers has a different quality. You know, discernment has a definition in Webster's. It says that discernment is perception in the absence of judgment, with a view to obtaining spiritual direction and understanding. Hence, I could discern that your shoes are different than my shoes. I have no judgment about that. I have no energy about it. I can accept your right to wear shoes that are different than mine. I discern that they're different, and I accept that difference. Judgment, however, we pass judgment, has the energy, right, of wrongness in it, right? You got on those kind of shoes? Oh, that's just wrong. And you wrong. People that are wrong need to be punished because they are not like me. We've got that belief system going on in our media right now, right? You know those people? You know those people, those ones. You know the ones I'm talking about, right? They're just wrong, right? And they need to be punished. That's the prevailing mentality, the energetic that we find in our life today, in our society, in our minds. And it keeps us lost, keeps us separated from that magnificent light that's within us. Passing judgment is connected to that thread of belief around guilt, shame, and blame. That you did something wrong, you need to be punished, which is really a reflection of our own inner judgment. Another way of saying it is that if you spot it, you've got it. That hidden belief system here is that I did something wrong, I deserve to be punished. I believe I am something wrong, I need to be punished, which is nothing other than shame. Or something is wrong in the world and somebody out there needs to be punished. And we see this clearly in our media headlines all around us today. Ernest Holmes writes in The Science of Mind, founder of religious science, on page 457, he writes, "The mind which condemns understands not the truth of being, and the heart which would shut the door of its bosom to one who is mistaken strangles its own life, closing its eyes to a greater vision. The biggest life is the one which includes the most. Not that we foster vice or place a premium upon wrongdoing, but that we understand the frailties of human nature and we learn to overlook much. To him who loves much, much is forgiven." In the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, we find the language of the second agreement, which reads, "Don't take anything personally. It's not about us." Don Miguel writes, "Whatever happens around you, don't take it personally. If I see you on the street and say, 'Hey, you are so stupid,' without knowing you, it's not about you. It's about me. If you take it personally, then perhaps you believe you are stupid. Maybe you think to yourself, 'How does he know? Is he clairvoyant? Or can everybody see how stupid I am?'" So there is a way out of the darkness. There is a way that we can proclaim our light by consciously directing our intention and our attention towards the light. And fortunately, in this teaching, we have spiritual tools to do that. We like to call the basic tool set around this camp MAP: meditation, affirmation, and prayer treatment. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science and the creator of the spiritual mind treatment, was a seeking spirit like many of you here tonight. In 1909, at the age of 25, he read Emerson and he caught fire. Those of you who took the Roots class recently had a chance to read Emerson's essays and to read the book, the essay about self-reliance, which talks about our own enlightenment, believing in ourselves, believing in that inner truth that comes through our intuition and our direct knowing. So he caught fire by reading Christian D. Larson. And one particular book he read was The Ideal Made Real. We often read quotes from this on Sunday service as an inspirational reading. He experienced this high spiritual feeling while reading Larson. He was inspired to plunge more deeply into learning and seeking and practicing the art of mental treatment. To those who have not yet read Christian D. Larson, I've selected a passage for your inspiration this evening. This is from his book called Your Forces and How to Use Them. And this particular reading is called Promise Yourself. He writes, "Promise yourself to be so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind, to talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person you meet, to make all your friends feel that there is something in them, to look at the sunny side of everything and make your optimism come true, to think only the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best, to be just as enthusiastic about the success of others as you are about your own, to forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future, to wear a cheerful countenance at all times and give every living creature you meet a smile, to give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others, to be too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to permit the presence of trouble, to think well of yourself and to proclaim this fact to the world, not in loud words, but great deeds, to live in faith that the whole world is on your side, so long as you are true to the best that is in you. I say amen to that. Amen to that. Holmes caught fire from reading Larson, and he distilled 3 basic ideas that were to become foundational to this spiritual science that we practice today. Number 1, prayer continues consciously or unconsciously all the time. Therefore, we must learn to consciously pray without ceasing and behold the good in everyone and everything, to call it forth. Number 2, we can overcome negative relative conditions by learning to control our thoughts. And number 3, we are not victims of circumstance. We actually create the conditions in our lives by the way that we think about life. In practice of meditation, we become aware of our thoughts. We learn that we are not the voice in our heads. We are the one who hears that voice. We are the one who chooses which direction we will take, despite that radio station going off in our head 24/7. You know the one I'm talking about, right? We hear that inner farmer telling us that it is what it is, that we are what we are, and no matter what it looks like, we are not lost. In the practice of affirmation, we learn how to change the consciousness, our own consciousness, rather than fall victim to the subjective consciousness around us. We learn to drive our own vehicle rather than to let someone else drive it for us. That reminds me of that story about old Herman driving home from work one night. He's driving on the freeway. All of a sudden, he gets a call on his cell phone. It's his wife. She says, baby, be careful, be careful. It's a maniac out there driving the wrong way on Route 280. He said, yeah, baby, I know. He said, there's hundreds of them out here driving the wrong way. Remind me, my grandmother used to say, she said, when you go to the zoo and you're looking at that monkey, she said, why you looking at that monkey? That monkey looking dead at you. The third foundational practice is prayer treatment. A treatment is for the specific purpose of changing our own consciousness, not changing the mind of God, not changing the attitude of God. And although the resultant demonstrations look like something is happening in physical world reality around us, it's really happening first in our consciousness. For the demonstration is created twice, first in our own minds and then in the objective world. Around here, we teach the model of the seed, the soil, and the plant. The seed is your thought, your idea that you plant into the soil, the subjective law, which always says yes. It goes into that soil and it comes out in form as a plant. It's always manifested. You say to the law, I'm always broke. Law says, yep, you always broke. Says, I'm always sick. I'm always catching a cold. The law says, yes, you always sick. You always catching a cold. It says yes according to our faith, our belief, and our acceptance. Our faith is what we do. Our belief is what we think over and over and over again until it becomes hard-coded as a belief. And our acceptance is what we say yes to. In the January 1929 issue of Science of Mind magazine, Ernest Holmes wrote an article entitled Treatment, Why, What, and How. It's still appropriate. He wrote these instructions. He started off saying, quiet the mind. This is meditation. We take time to just quiet the mind, to turn off that radio station, to hear it from afar. He continues, and definitely state that faith and understanding are present. This is affirmation. Mentally state and spiritually feel that a conscious and constructive presence pervades all life. These are steps 1 and 2. Recognition of the presence and unification. You can also affirm simply that God is and I am. Holmes continues, affirm that the Spirit wills to respond and that it does respond. Sit quietly and believe. Now, state your desire as simply as possible, using only such words as have a real meaning to you. This is the 3rd step in the spiritual mind treatment, or realization step. We use the power of affirmation to consciously direct our intention and our attention to that which we desire. Holmes writes, never try to use other people's thoughts. You are alone with cause. He means that no one else is at blame here. You are not victim. And he finishes by saying, see to it that no denial of this thought enters your mind. He's reminding us to see to it that no denial and to be aware of judgment, guilt, shame, and blame as creative forces in our mind. As simply as you can, Holmes writes, create a definite acceptance in the mind that you are being guided into paths of peace and abundance. Feel a response in your thought. Feel that what you state is the truth about yourself. Affirm that you accept and believe and receive. In the book of Romans 12:2, it is written, do not imitate the ways of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So my question for you this evening, as we move into a new year, a new life, and we leave behind the structures of the old, is, am I saying yes to my own light? Am I saying yes to my power of dominion in my life? My own divinity as a child of God, a divine idea in the mind of that one. If not, why not? Is it because I'm taking something personal? Have I forgotten that everyone else is in their own dream and what they're doing has nothing to do with me? It's all about them. Have I internalized someone else's creation as having meaning in my life? So when I eat beans, do other people get gas? No. No, of course not. So why do I have gas from somebody else eating beans, right? What am I judging as wrong? Where am I withholding forgiveness? Certainly, when I use the gift of spiritual discernment, I could see that another choice may have been preferable. And yet, if I am willing, I can see the gifts that came from that event, no matter how painful it was. Because of the hurt, my heart has been broken open, and I am more compassionate with others. Because of the hurt, I can help with the healing of others who have been hurt in the same way and who come to me for the medicine. Because of that hurt, I am now more compassionate and loving with myself, knowing that I too have hurt others in ways that I regret. And finally, ask yourself, am I willing to proclaim my light? Am I willing to spend time in the garden with my Creator, to speak my word, to call forth that light within me that is calling to me in my dreams of the night? You know, the best stories are the true stories, the things that really happen. So back in 2008, I found myself accidentally on purpose in the ministerial class at Agape with Reverend Michael. And it was an accident. It was not my intention to do ministerial class at that time. I figured maybe another 10, 20, maybe 30 years down the line I might do it. But I found myself in that class, and I had the opportunity to take a class called The Aramaic Jesus. And this was a class about the Jesus, not the Jesus from Malibu, but the Jesus that was from the neighborhood, you know? The Jesus with no shoes, the Jesus who walked the streets, you know, the real Jesus, the Christ presence. And so Reverend Joanne Coleman was teaching this class, and I remember how excited I was to take this class with her, and I told her, I said, you know, I went out and bought all the books. I got Rocco Errico, I'm studying Aramaic, and, you know, just all this stuff, all this research I had. She says, yeah. She said, I know you're a scientist. She said, but why don't you try another way of learning about the Christ? Why don't you go direct to the source and just ask the Christ presence for an experience that will prepare you for this class? And I thought, wow, what an idea. So I did that. I asked. I go directly. I need the big bang. I need, you know, butterflies. I love them. I like hummingbirds, but I need that spiritual lightning bolt, you know? A couple of weeks later, Reverend Charles got a call that one of our students from the computer lab, Jake, had sitting at the dinner table with his family, eating. Young man, he was about 16, I guess, at the time. And he, in his boisterousness, he swallowed some food the wrong way. It covered up his windpipe, and he went unconscious. His family called the paramedics. They came. They attempted to revive him. The news that they delivered to his mother is that he was deprived of oxygen for so long that he was brain dead, and that he would probably just be a vegetable. And so they had him on life support. They were wanting to do a trach on him to put the tube inside, because they said that if he kept it in his mouth for much longer, bacteria would be a problem, and then there would be other implications. And his mother would not accept that as his truth or as her truth. And so she called Reverend Charles. And Reverend Charles told her, says, listen, you stay with him. Make sure somebody's in that room. You give instructions to the nurses and the doctors. They are not to discuss his condition. They are not to say in his subconscious mind around him, you know, the old poor Jake, he's never going to recover, he's brain dead. That is not to be in his environment, you know. And Reverend Charles told her, said, you hold the truth. And so she said, well, can you come over here and pray with him? He said, don't worry, I'll send somebody. So he called me. And he said, listen, I need you to do something. I can't get over there right now, but I need your support. And when he told me, I went into alarm, because the image that my mind saw was this kid, you know, who just a bundle of joy and enthusiasm, you know, and I knew him really well. He'd been in our Toastmasters class, and just a very good-hearted kid, you know. And I could not see myself going in there and seeing this boy on life support. And so I called for prayer. I called the practitioners. I called Deb. I called everybody. I need prayer. I had to go into meditation, into the silence, to still my mind from the outer world and go straight to the truth, to what I know, that his life is the life of God, you know, and that God's life is whole, is perfect, is complete. You know, and I had to continue to tell myself, you know, it's fake it till you make it, you know. I had to go through the motions and then allow others to pray me up, so that when I walked over to St. Joseph's, I was firmly convinced I was going to go in that room, do a circle with the family, that we were going to pray this boy up, you know, and whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And so I walked into the ICU at St. Joseph's Hospital over here in Burbank, the ICU rooms with the glass doors all around, and there were people in, and then straight ahead I saw their room. And I walked into that door, and I opened up the sliding glass door, and when I walked in the room, this boy tried to get up out of the bed. Like my grandmama said, if I'm lying, I'm flying. When I walked, and it scared me because it was like the dead coming back. You know what I mean? It was just something that alarmed me. And immediately I just went to him. I said, Jake, don't get up, don't get up, don't get up. And his mother said, I told you, you know, he's not dead, he's not dead. And so we prayed there. She committed to stay there, the whole vigil. His sisters stayed for 8 hours. His auntie stayed, she stayed. They made sure within a day of that visit and that prayer session, and the practitioners were praying, Reverend Charles was praying, they pulled the tube out because his oxygen level started going up, just like miraculously. And they said, well, we can't understand it because his brain was deprived of oxygen long enough for him to never be able to come back from that. And yet, about 6 months later, I was standing right there. We were singing, I think Will was leading the song, I release and I let go. And something just said, look over your shoulder. And I looked over my shoulder right there where Jade is sitting, about right there. And there was Jake standing with his mother singing that song, Now, it looked like a miracle, but in the mind of God, it was a naturally occurring event. It was a teaching brought to us to remind us, so that when we hear this story, like when we hear the stories of the Christ, we are reminded of our divinity, the power of prayer within us, the power that we have around us. Sometimes we have to go to somebody else and say, listen, I need to be lifted up through this. Can you help me with this, Because sometimes we cannot see it, right? Sometimes we stop and we ask somebody who's lost themselves for direction, and they just give you the directions that they know, right? Right? But we have learned something here in this teaching, that we are not lost. We don't have to ask the blind for directions because you have the power of conscious choice, and you can always stop and ask the divine within you for direction. You can always come to any of us, to the ministers here, the practitioners here, and ask for support. You have chosen to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So in this moment, I'm telling you that where you came from is back there in the past. It's over with. It's all gone. Thank God it's over. And where you are right now is right here, standing in the magnificent glory of the light that you are created in. And where you are going is to a place beyond your wildest dreams. Because this practice, this teaching is powerful. I would not have been here for 18 years. I would never have become a practitioner and a minister and found my own light had I not found this path. And so I'm not sharing with you this evening about something that I read in a book. And I read a lot of books. I got that scientist thing going on. But I'm sharing with you about something that has happened in my life. That I am not lost, and neither are you. And that we don't ever, ever have to feel that we are alone. For God is right where you are, right here and right now. Namaste, family.